I'm going to call the Board of County Commissioners back into regular session for Tuesday, May 2nd, 2017. And we have a few items to get back to on our agenda that we skipped over this morning due to a lot of public comment and trying to get to staff that had to get out of the building. So we're going to jump back to item 3 and just check to see if there was any commissioners' response to public comments or other issues or remonstrance. Seeing none, and I don't believe there was any emergency business today. We do need to do the consent calendar, which we skipped over also. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine, and they'll be voted on in one motion with no discussion. And if there was discussion desired, they'd be pulled like the item this morning. Do I have a motion on the consent calendar?
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously, 4-0, and that was Lycan moved and Williams second. So we will jump down to item 6B now, and that is in the matter of dog licensing within Lane County, and we have Mike Russell here, who was patient enough to come back this afternoon. So thank you, Mr. Russell. Woof.
Woof.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Mike Russell, Lane County Parks and Animal Services Division Manager. So this discussion today is just an informational item. It's a kind of a culmination of several issues coming together in one item. We'll kind of work through those. For the sake of the public and perhaps Commissioner Williams, I'll start by talking about the transition in the service model. Starting in 2012, Lane County, City of Eugene, City of Springfield were providing tri-agency services to the metropolitan area and unincorporated Lane County, and had several contracts with smaller agencies as well to provide dog control services. In 2012, City of Eugene decided to create their own program, pulled out of the partnership, and kind of forced the county to look at a different service model. So before, Lane County was the lead agency providing licensing, enforcement, shelter and adoption services for county residents, including Springfield, Eugene area. After 2012, we contracted out the sheltering and adoption services to Green Hill Humane Society and maintained the licensing and enforcement activities. Went from a crew of 15 FTE down to 2 FTE, and contracting the shelter and adoption services out to Green Hill has been a good way to go. We're satisfied with the service they're providing. We maintained licensing where we were licensing animals in Springfield, Eugene, and rural Lane County. We now only license in rural Lane County. The transition was, I would say, confusing for the public, where before they were basically going to Lane County, the majority of licenses for people were going to Lane County to buy their license, and their tags all said Lane County on them. When the transition occurred, suddenly Springfield had their own licensing program, Eugene had their own licensing program, and Lane County then had its own. So all the agencies did what they could to inform the public. If they were in the city limits, they now buy a city license. Similarly, Lane County did its best to get the information out that Lane County residents, rural Lane County residents, could still buy a Lane County license. We still field calls today from people who have a Lane County license but live in the city of Eugene or Springfield and are confused about that. So you have a Animal Services Advisory Committee, and they've wrestled with this since the transition and really wanted to have moved and brought a recommendation to the board to consider this countywide licensing model again, figuring out a way to bring the agencies together. First of all, to simplify dog licensing in the county. People in the fringe areas, the urban growth boundary areas, the donut areas, however you want to characterize it, there's confusion about which license they buy. Where their neighbor will buy a city license, a Lane County resident has to buy a Lane County license, and there's a lot of back and forth refunding license fees because they bought the wrong license and informing them they have to go to different agencies. There's confusion on vets a lot. We have approximately 40 vendors of our dog licenses, mostly vets and vet offices, and they're confused on which license and how do they determine where a person lives and if they're in the city or in the county, and we deal with that as well, and their office staff get frustrated, and some have said we no longer want to sell licenses because of the confusion that it causes. So the issue is, while we've made efforts to provide the public the information, there's still confusion, and it continues to cause instances where pet owners buy the wrong license, as I've said. Lane County Animal Services Advisory Committee has taken the issue on and recommended the board consider establishing a countywide pet licensing approach that will, one, reduce confusion for public on which license to buy, reduce confusion for licensed vendors, as I said, and make it easier for pet owners to license, as they will only need to ensure they live within the county, not necessarily a city. Possibly open up opportunities to expand the vendor pool to include retail stores, convenience stores, and pet stores. That's one thing the Parks Advisory Committee is really keen on, is kind of expanding our vendor pool away from, while maintaining the vets, but also convenience stores or whatever, being able to sell our licenses as well. Remove the potential for a barrier to licensing. Because people are confused, they just, forget it. I won't even get a license. I won't comply. Jurisdictions that have currently licensing programs in place include Veneta, Junction City, Coburg, Eugene, Springfield, Crestwell, Cottage Grove, Lowell, Westford, and Oak Ridge. Cities of Florence and Dune City both recently rescinded their codes related to dog licensing, and so now they don't provide dog licensing services within those cities, Florence and Dune City. The attachment to the board packet summarizes or provides that information. You can see of the 12 cities and Lane County, there's a wide range in licensing fees between each agency. Some agencies like Lane County for a 3-year license for a spayed or neutered pet is $42, where in places like Cottage Grove, they only sell a 1-year license, and it's for a spayed neutered pet is $10. So there's a wide range in what jurisdictions are charging for licenses, as well as different requirements from each agency. So this idea of a common licensing model has some challenges to come up with a way that each agency gets the revenue that they may need from the program to cover their expenses or what other needs they may have. And so there are challenges definitely with that. This item originally was requested by Commissioner Farr, who attended County Animal Services Advisory Committee meeting, heard the discussion, and wanted a briefing for the board. Commissioner Stewart was also involved. How he was involved was in 2015, Lane County engaged Oregon Solutions to survey animal welfare issues throughout the county. So they, on our behest, and it was their initial evaluation is free, so we asked them to engage. They agreed. They thought it was a good reason to get involved in the community to determine opportunities to coordinate with other jurisdictions' efforts, support for a new shelter facility, how to provide common services more efficiently, and generally get issues out on the table that can be dealt with together. I think we recognize that licensing isn't the only issue. There are other issues, enforcement issues, rabies reporting, those kind of things that each agency may have some capacity for that other agencies may not, and how can we coordinate better on a county-wide basis for dog control in the community. The Oregon Solutions team concluded their process and found general support for a new public shelter facility. As you know, the current shelter facility is outdated and capacity is limited and generally needs to be updated. It's a 1970s era facility, and definitely standards have changed since that time. So there was general support from each agency to look at a new shelter facility. There was not agreement on where that facility should be, and more centrally located versus more rural in location. But there also was no agreement from the jurisdictions on how to proceed. So the Oregon Solutions recommended an animal services summit to get all the players in Lane County together and discuss three main points: development of agreements on funding strategies and coordination. This could include the discussion about common licensing. Development of an ongoing work group which meets monthly or bi-monthly to discuss issues in progress, and then help resolve issues around location of a public shelter facility. So that was their recommendation. They handed it back to us. They said at that point it's kind of, we could engage them, but from that point on it would be fee-based and that kind of thing, or we could take it back and proceed. Commissioner Stewart was in favor of an animal services summit to kind of get the jurisdictions together and start talking about animal issues in the county. That has not taken place yet. At this time, staff's made some initial contacts with the Center for Dialogue and Resolution here in Eugene, and regarding the scope and estimate of a cost to provide facilitation services for an animal services summit process. What we scoped out was 3 4-hour facilitated meetings throughout, you know, a 4 or 5 month time frame. Identification of major issues between the jurisdictions, initial agreements on priority actions, and then formation of an ongoing work group to implement agreements and facilitate ongoing coordination. Like I said, that has not happened yet, but we've done some initial scoping on that. So that's the information I wanted to provide to you and the report that I have. The idea of universal licensing is completely and totally supported by the Animal Services Advisory Committee. They see that as there's a lot of benefits to doing that as opposed to what's happening now with each jurisdiction doing their own thing and the public kind of being confused about who's providing what service. I'm available for questions, and that's my report.
Thank you, Mike.
I do have
Mr. Williams.
a question or two. Compliance issues and enforcement. Some years ago in Cottage Grove, who issued licenses, there was one year where there were 12 dogs in Cottage Grove. And I'm pretty sure that that could have just been on my block, but that's how many licenses were issued by the city of Cottage Grove. So I have a real concern about compliance, but also about the enforcement for those folks that have dogs and don't comply. So don't get me wrong. I've had dogs all my life, and they are indeed man's best friend. But I have, you know, I think there should be a shelter for dogs that need the protection. I'm not opposed to that at all, but my experience has been is that to get people to comply, and those that don't comply, there should be an enforcement arm to that, and I don't see that happening. So I'm sorry to be that frank about it, but that's my perception of the real issue there.
Chair Bozovich, Commissioner Williams, I just wanted to say our compliance rate in Lane County. So we estimate probably about 25,000 dogs in rural Lane County. That's based on accepted estimate models. So it's about 25,000. We have about 9,000, little over 9,000 licenses. So we're seeing about 35% compliance. We definitely want to see that go up. And so we've done some things administratively. We require vets to report rabies certifications. And so when we get those and they haven't licensed their dog, we contact that owner and remind them, thank you for being a responsible owner and getting your dogs vaccinated. Now you need to also license your pet. So we do that. We've seen an increase in compliance as a result of that. And we also enforce renewals. So we send reminder letters saying, hey, your license is going to expire in 3 months. Please consider renewing your license now. Then after this 3 months has expired, we send another letter and says your license has expired. Please go to our website and buy your license. And then if they continue not to reply or comply, I actually give them a phone call and ask them to renew their license right there, or give them some time frame to renew their license. If they continue not to respond, we send them a citation. So we've kind of done some things to bolster our enforcement of licensing within the county, and we are definitely seeing results of that. It's not a revenue thing for us because the majority of the program is funded through the general fund, but any additional revenue we can generate obviously takes that pressure off the general fund. So we're trying to do that. We've seen year over year increases in our licensing revenue and reducing our reliance commensurately with the general fund. So here, I agree with what you're saying. Compliance and enforcement is an important aspect of what we do. And if we're not going to enforce the licensing, then we're not going to get the compliance.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say that you identified Commissioner Farr and Commissioner Stewart as being people that are interested in this. I'd like to add my voice to this also to say that I think that when Faye brought this up some time ago, that we were kind of moving in the direction of getting some kind of I felt like we were moving in the direction of getting some kind of summit going. I don't know if I'd call it dog summit or animal welfare summit, and it could be narrowed, just to dogs because that's a big enough topic, but to get the cities and the county involved with it, because these compliance rates, 9,000 out of 25,000 dogs, pretty miserable, pretty low, and both the carrot end of things, reminder letters, but also the stick end, your dog gets involved in some enforcement action, you're going to have to do more than just pass for the license. Those kinds of ordinances where there's a carrot and a stick, I think, and policies, not just ordinances, but policies, will be a way to try to do something about this. And I think that the other numbers, compliance rates in some of the smaller communities may well be near where the unincorporated rate is. Do you know what they are in Eugene and Springfield?
I do not.
Yeah. So I think that's something that might come out of this dog summit, is that this becomes a problem that local government, the federal government isn't talking about the problem of dogs in communities, and I don't think the state is. It's sort of our issue, and I think it's a public health issue. It certainly gets involved in what happens to all the waste that the dogs are producing. Are all the dog owners responsible dog owners, or are there some irresponsible ones, and what do we do about that? And I do think that this has been a problem for a long time, and I know that other communities have gotten a lot more aggressive about solving the problem. You may recall a few years ago when we talked about what they'd done what they had done in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, where the tax assessor and the dog licensing people got together and sent out a mailing to property taxpayers in Allegheny County. And the additional cost of inserting that dog mailing or animal licensing mailing was pretty minimal, and it got back a lot more licenses. And then we could maybe have maybe not a specific license change for each community, but maybe at least some cooperation. When we do get the money, well, you just bought yourself a Cottage Grove license if you send it to us and you are a Cottage Grove resident. So I don't know, but I do think that we ought to keep moving on this, and having this report back shouldn't just end, and I feel like we should move on to a dog summit. And that's my bark today.
So I'd like to jump in on this for real quick and just add my voice to the idea that we should hold that summit. Years ago, when I was actually the liaison to the Animal Services, David Caldwell brought forward a lot of information from Calgary, BC, about how they managed to achieve close to 100% licensing in that city. And a lot of the various things they talked about was removing barriers and making it easy to license and all that, and a little bit of education about the benefits of licensing and everything. And our current system right now, where people are having trouble figuring out who they're supposed to even buy a license from, it just adds that barrier where people give up and they don't. It's just not worth it. And that's part of the problem. I do see a little bit of an issue with the mandatory reporting from rabies vaccines. I know my vet has stopped issuing licenses because they felt like it would be a barrier to vaccination if there was that mandatory reporting. So it was more important for him to have dogs vaccinated against rabies than it was for him to have them licensed. And that was his choice. That and the fact that it was so confusing because he happens to have his office in unincorporated Santa Clara, and most of his clientele, half of it's city and half of it's county residents, and who does he issue the license for and everything else. It was quite a problem. So it's an issue that needs to be resolved, and one of the easiest ways to resolve it is if we can get a common licensing format, make it easy for folks to do, either at their vet's office, online, however they do it. I've got 4 spayed, neutered, licensed animals myself, so it's easy for me because I go, every time it's time, I just make sure I have a trip past Delta. For other reasons, I'll stop and get my dog license while I'm there.
Yeah.
So it's easy for me, but not so easy maybe for the person that's way out in Walton or Blatchley to get into Delta to do that if their vet doesn't do it for them. So I'll just add my voice, and I don't know if you need any official motion from us to try and move ahead with that project, but it is necessary, and I think with a little bit of education, going back to that presentation that David Caldwell put together about what are the barriers to licensing and particularly what are the benefits to licensing. I love that that tag on the collar is like the dime, carrying a dime used to be in your shoe when you were a kid, back when there were payphones, and it was only a dime. That was your way to get home if you got a little stray. That's basically what that little tag is it's their ticket home versus staying in the pound till you figure out where the dog is. So it's a real benefit to everyone. So I think we need to do something to get some kind of common system together to get higher compliance and just benefit the pet owners in this community. And it'll help fund other things like enforcement and control and the shelter. So anything to add? I appreciate the report and thank you for your time. So we're going to go to county administration announcements. We have our temporarily acting county administrator because we didn't expect to be running this late. Anything to announce today?
Nothing to announce, sir.
And we already kind of did exec session, so I don't think there are any county council announcements today. So we're in commissioners' business. Any announcements from commissioners? Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on Monday at AOC Day, so anybody's invited to come to the committees, but our transportation committee, so Senator Beyer will be one of our guests. And it was apropos with Alex providing an update on the transportation package. So if anybody wants to attend, you're more than welcome to. We go through a little bit of business, and but Senator Beyer is our guest. We'll provide an update on the joint transportation, the Joint Legislative Transportation Committee, and what I think what's transpiring. I think we hope to have a pretty open and good back and forth session with Senator Beyer on what to expect. My last conversation with him, and I think it's pretty fitting with what Alex, his report this morning. So my last conversation is that he's getting much more optimistic than what he was just a month ago, and which I think is good news for our much needed transportation dollars. So our committee meeting actually begins at 9:30. So it's at the legislative or the local government building up in Salem. Anybody's invited. We're going to have the big conference room, so I expect to have several other folks to come in and at least listen in, and so you're all invited if you want to attend.
Thank you. Any other announcements from commissioners? Then we'll go on to agenda team requests and work session requests. And I'd like to take a moment to clarify the Holt Pond BLM cooperator status was actually supposed to come to us under this item somewhat. And I think Alex misspoke this morning. It's not going to come back to the board. What he'd like, I'd like to just reconfirm the head nods is to delegate the authority to the county administrator to actually sign the MOU for the cooperator status, if that's so. Is everybody good with that? That was the original intent of that item. So no other agenda team or work session requests. Then we'll move on to review of assignments.
Chair Bozovich, the assignments I have include Mike Russell to report back in 6 months on the Large Events Oversight Group, and that Steve Dingle will draft a letter to the BLM regarding the Holt Dam Management Plan for signature by the county administrator.
Great.
I was wondering if we could get a precise Tuesday, approximately 6 months from now, because if we have that date, then it'll show up on the board assignments. Yeah.
Future agenda items.
Like we could put that on the county's future agenda items, and for that board meeting, it could be listed now, as that's when it's going to be. Because I think one of the frustrations I have is if the board wants to have something come back and we don't establish the date, then the only notice the public has of that coming up is the Thursday before.
Yeah.
And this is something that if people want to know, well, what's going on with these large events, we can point to that date from now until that date.
So if you're okay, the agenda team can take a look at dates when we meet next week and come back with a date.
Yeah.
Get that set and advertised, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So any other assignments that got missed? And we already held executive session. Is there any other business for the board today? Seeing none, then we will adjourn.